Today, me and Noah Chapman will be speaking about crack cocaine and the crack epidemic in the USA. What year was this, Chapman?
In the 1980s.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so what is the crack epidemic? It took place in the 1980s, and the drug rose to popularity because of its affordability, its immediate euphoric effect, and its high profitability. The crack epidemic had particularly devastating effects within the African American communities of the inner cities by causing the increase of addictions, deaths, and drug-related crimes. So the epidemic started when crack cocaine first surfaced in the 1960s, when the Colombian Medellin cartel saw an opportunity to import the drug. Unlike powder cocaine, crack was easier to develop, more cost efficient to produce, and cheaper to buy, which made it more economically accessible. Crack sold for anywhere between $5 and $20 per vial, which is a small capsule that contains pebble-sized pieces of crack. So crack cocaine was noted for its instantaneous and intense high, which kept users craving more, thus causing an upsurge in crack cocaine addictions between 1982 and 1985. The number of cocaine users increased by 1.6 million people. And in the US, it first appeared in Miami, where Caribbean immigrants taught adolescents the technique of converting powdered cocaine into crack. Where the teenagers eventually introduced the business of producing and distributing the drug into other major cities of the United States, including cities like New York City and Detroit and Los Angeles.
Oh, very interesting, Noah. Now let's look at how this epidemic affected the inner city communities, with a bit of a focus on the American dream. So in the 1980s, the intersection of people who used crack cocaine and the HIV/AIDS epidemic propelled in the American psyche the idea that people who use crack cocaine in the US is primarily associated with black communities in major metropolitan areas, like the cities Noah Chapman mentioned. Don't know. The initiation of crack cocaine into socially eroded communities took place during President Ronald Reagan's Ronald Reagan term office, when there was a structural shift that caused huge manufacturing industries to move outside the cities. The relocation created workforce competitions that further widened the gap between social and economic segments in the inner cities of America. So this meant, of course, outsourcing and very few jobs being left in the inner cities, which meant a lot of jobless young men. So the emergence of crack cocaine in the inner cities led to a drastic increase in crime between 1981 and 1986. Federal prison admission for drug offense soared, and murder and manslaughter rates increased significantly. There were also marked increases in robbery and aggravated assault. Ultimately, the prison population doubled due to the arrest of drug dealers and their customers. 1 in every 4 African American males aged 20 to 29 was either incarcerated or on probation or parole by 1989. Which contributed to the United States having the highest incarceration rate in the world. By 1995, the statistics had increased to nearly 1 in 3. This obviously damaged the general reputation of African American people that hindered them in their quest of achieving the American dream. Although this was a very negative change, for many young Afro-Americans, the sale of crack cocaine became a path to success and riches in an otherwise jobless and opportunityless world for them, because these jobless inner cities, the only real way out for them, or a way to gain success, was by selling crack cocaine. So now we should discuss the racial and social framing with regard to crack cocaine and crack cocaine use and dealing. So, of course, the incarceration rates for the black African Americans counter to the white young males relative to the population was very unevenly distributed. And the high number of criminalized blacks could be described by different factors. One is the racial aspect, and racism, where blacks are targeted by the police and given harder sentences and longer jail time, and things like fewer questions being asked when arresting a black person, and them just often being the suspect could be one reason. The other reason could be that more black teens and young men didn't have the means to get an education and were forced to sell drugs on the streets, where more white young men had the opportunity to get a job or an education and move out of the inner cities. But the blacks didn't. Anyways, that's me and Noah's podcast, and we would like to say thank you, and and we'll see you next time, where we're going to be talking about the Indian tiger.